Ramada's been around for, what, since 2018 now? But we couldn't do it last year because of COVID, obviously. And we worked really, really hard with state and local governments, and just that they could allow us to do the show this year is special because you know, when you miss a year, you know, you miss the people, and you know, we you know, miss everyone. You know, it's you get to know everybody. And people ask, well, why is it in Grants Pass now? So if you don't know why, we had the Ramada, but the state had taken over the Ramada because of the Alameda fire, and that people who were victims of the Alameda fire had to have a place to go, so they were able to live there, and now it's going to be a permanent housing for homeless in Medford. And there's really no venue there that's affordable anymore. So, yeah, so we had to come to Grants Pass, and I haven't been to Grants Pass in maybe 25 years, you know, but I love it here. I love the mountainous areas, and I'm an outdoors person, I love hiking and all of that, so I'm happy that we're here. And a lot of people seem to really be positive about Grants Pass. You know, it's really been embraced. I'm just very thankful. And meeting a lot of people coming from Medford. I've met people coming from Washington to be here, you know, just to see Kyle. So, just very happy. And what we try to tell people is, you know, Meadowlark, if you see an actor you like, you have to come and see him because, you know, we have a rule at Meadowlark, once an actor appears, they never come back. So Kyle, unfortunately, we will never see you here again. Yeah, this is it for you, one and done. But you know, we do that because, you know, a lot of people say, oh, I've seen Kyle at Meadowlark before, you know, 2 years ago. You know what I mean? So, and we always want to bring in fresh new actors because there's so many actors that people want to see. You know, we try to bring someone new, and my most memorable was Gil Gerard and Felix Silla. And unfortunately, Felix had passed away this year. And that's why we tell people too, is you have to come and see these actors because they could be here today but gone tomorrow. So it could be that. Not saying, you know, you're a young kid, but you know.
Flight home.
Yeah. So, so you know, it's important to see these actors. And when I was a kid, we'd see a lot of, I was into Doctor Who, so a lot of Doctor Who actors would come in, and to be able to see. I've been lucky. I've seen the second Doctor all the way to the recent one. So I've been lucky in that. So, but this is not about me and my fandom and how much I love everyone here. It's about Kyle Pacek and the Mandalorian. So, and also, Kyle said I'm allowed to say this. Kyle is going to be featured in the new Boba Fett television series coming out on Disney Plus. Yeah. So, not only are you seeing an actor from the Mandalorian, but you're seeing an actor in the Boba Fett series that has not even been released. And another thing is this is Kyle's very first convention appearance. So, to say, hey, I saw Kyle Pacek at his first appearance, it's amazing. And you know what? Portland didn't get him, New York City didn't get him, LA didn't get him. Grants Pass got him. How cool is that? So, well, let's start because, you know, you're kind of new on the scene to acting. So tell us a little bit, even though, well, first of all, let me ask, who has listened to Kyle's interview on the radio a week or two ago? Did anybody? You did? Okay, well, we'll go a little bit into, you know, how you started.
Yeah, absolutely.
So can you kind of give us a rundown how that happened?
So I'm from the East Coast in New Hampshire, and when I was a senior in high school, I really wanted to own my own motorsports company, so I did do that my freshman year in college. And that, I'll put a timestamp on it, but that was 2006. And in 2011, I was wrapping up college, and I was actually at an expo for my company that I've had there for 4 years in Anaheim, California, and a recruiter from Disney came up to me and said, hey, do you want to be in the movie? I was like, no, not really. And then I said, you know, I was thinking to myself, like, this motorsports company, this is what I wanted to do. And at the time, I had a brick and mortar location, and I grew it to where I wanted to be. And so I really didn't want to even think about any other opportunities because I was going down the road that I wanted to, that I dreamed of, essentially. I ended up taking the guy's information. I thought it was too good to be true. He said this was July of 2011, and they contacted me shortly after. They said, we want to fly you out and work on a movie for 3 weeks in September this year. And so we went back and forth, and I agreed to it. It was for Oz the Great and Powerful, and I flew out, and the movie didn't do too well, but the production was huge, and Disney put a lot of time, effort, money into it. Obviously, it has a big past, you know, Wizard of Oz and whatnot. So to have a prequel for that is pretty high standards. So my introduction to the film industry was pretty massive. Second week I was there, I got upgraded to doing stunts. They noticed my physical ability versus some of the other little people that were there. So that turned my 3-week contract into 2.5 months, and I was able to portray 3 different looks on that movie, and then going from just a regular actor to upgraded stunt stuff. So that was a huge game changer. Just opportunity in general to join the union, to be automatically eligible and whatnot. And at the time, I also didn't realize how lucky I was, and the best way to describe it is if you're 16 and you're driving your first car and it's a Rolls Royce and you have no idea what a Toyota Corolla is like. And then I just thought everything was going to be like that. And it was still amazing to me, so I went home, and of course everyone was like, man, you're supposed to be gone for 3 weeks, where have you been, sort of deal. And I had my business that I was operating from across country with employees and whatnot, communicating. Obviously I was going to be back for quite some time. And since that was working smoothly, that's what also allowed me to stay a little bit longer too. And so when I went back to New Hampshire, I learned 2 things. I could operate my business from across country, and then acting, stunt stuff was a ton of fun. So I ended up moving to California right after, because all the connections that I made on that show, I wanted to prove to them, hey, I'm serious. I want to actually do this, not 2 years from now. Hey, I'm Kyle. Do you remember me from that one movie? I was, showing action. So I moved there, and it's not the toot the horn, but it's been kind of non-stop ever since. And it's been an array of things, from commercials to music videos to movies to TV shows, of course. And it's fun because you just never know who's going to be calling and what's next. So I never would have thought about it as a kid doing this, but now that it's happening, it's pretty cool. And on that note, I do recommend, if anyone has any dreams or whatever, push through it. You just never know what's going to happen. And it's all about timing and networking with people and being who you are and making sure you shine.
Now you mentioned stunts. Now Felix Silla from Buck Rogers was a little person. He used to do a lot of stunts as well. He did a lot of stunts for movies even back in the 1940s, and some real classic films, and Planet of the Apes and all this types of stuff. And he did a lot of dangerous stunts. He was the stunt double for the kid in Raiders Lost Ark and the Temple of Doom. And he was dressed like a little kid. They were doing the rafting scene as it goes over the waterfalls and Indiana Jones and all this. And he almost drowned through that. And Spielberg even called him and said, asked if he was okay, because Spielberg thought he was dead. So tell me, what was the most difficult stunt that you have done so far?
So I've done a lot of things, from wire work to being lit on fire to just even fight scenes. And fight scenes don't sound that bad, but when you're relying on someone else to remember what you choreographed, I don't know, it's dangerous in its own way. They're all dangerous in their own, different, way. One of the crazier things I've done, I would say, was probably a lot of wire work, being launched in the air and relying on creating a good team of people. One time, I'm not going to mention the show name, but you may know of the show. I was in a harness, and we rehearsed this stunt for probably 2 weeks, and it was me basically running and getting launched into the air, and I was flying around, and it was just the stunt team and myself. It was probably, I would say, I don't know, 50 to 60 people. And we choreographed it down to the T. And then there was a pause because it got delayed, the scene got pushed. Meanwhile, while we're rehearsing all this, the main crew was filming elsewhere. So they ended up pushing it. There was a little bit of like a couple weeks, I guess, that went through, and then we were able to come back and actually shoot the scene. Now there's 200 to 250 people there. We're shooting the same exact scene. The guy that was operating the camera crane didn't realize the direction I was flying, and I was in a costume with a mask, so I wasn't really able to see much aside from like directly in front of me and like through a window, like so. And I remember getting launched in the air, and it's dead quiet, and I just hear everyone go at the same time. Like you can picture 250 people doing that, but I had no idea what they were making that noise over. And then I just saw something kind of like go by my very small vision, and we landed. They lowered me back down to the ground, and they came running up to me, "You okay? You okay?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm fine." I'm like, "What was that?" And like, "You almost hit the camera." And I almost hit the camera at like, I don't know, probably 20, 30 miles an hour flying through the air. So that was one of the things that was probably one of the scariest I've ever done. There's definitely been some other stuff like high falls where I was more nervous at the beginning, but that was like something that was almost like a after effect of like, whoa. So, I mean, each stunt, it doesn't really matter how big or how small it is, they're all dangerous in their own way.
Now, most people, they want to hear about Mandalorian stuff, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, I've only seen the first season and the first 3 episodes of the second season because my renewal was up. And at the time, I'm like, well, $69.99 for one show for a year. No, I'll wait till they get more stuff. I don't know. But so you play, because the Star Wars universe has many bounty hunters.
Yeah.
But you played a memorable bounty hunter in The Mandalorian. Do you want to talk about that scene and how they chose you to do that bounty hunter in that season and episode?
Yeah, basically, to back it up for a second, all the Jawa stuff, I did all the stunts for that, so when all the Jawas were getting like shot and killed by the Mandalorian or being pulled out of the sand crawler and stuff, that was all being ratcheted and thrown through the air on the big airbags and stuff. So even though those cuts were really short and fast, there was a lot that went into all that stuff. Not just my stuff, but everything that you see in the Mandalorian. And for the bounty hunter, yeah, there was 4 other bounty hunters plus myself, and they just wanted a little person for, I guess, diversity. I don't really know why they had me in particular, but they did, and they said, "Hey, Kyle, do you want to come back?" Mandalorian's also like a family. It's wild to be with so many people, and they all treat you the same way, first name basis, like really cool. And if they know you're working on something else between, like on the hiatus or whatever, they follow up with whatever you're working on. So when they did call and said, "Hey, we want you to be a bounty hunter," I was like, "Let's do it." And so there was a lot of, trying on costumes and stuff, and yeah, it was really cool. That's actually also a scene where after we tripped Mandalorian, he went flying and held the baby as hostage. That was a scene that everyone joked about, like, "Man, you're gonna get so much hate on the internet." And I was like, "Oh man." But I'm like, I'm really not that bad person. But it was also like one of those things, like even for myself to do, it was like, even though it's fake, it's still like, man, this is aggressive. But it was a lot of fun, and that scene actually required a lot of wire work as well, as far as being harnessed, and we rehearsed it so much, as far as running on the ground, and then being taken away on a line, and then also being ratcheted up through the sky, and then a Disney way of dying, off in the distance. So that whole scene was really cool too. And then since then, there's been more Jawa stuff.
So, I was already preparing this question, but I think you kind of already answered it. And for me, Baby Yoda is like the cutest thing ever.
Yes, indeed.
Cuter than you too.
I know, it's hard to believe, but yeah.
So, I mean, the thing is, when you're doing the scene, you had that little cute little baby in your eyes, how did you feel? Did you feel like
Well,
a jerk? How do you know? I mean,
Number one, it's actually really not that little. I mean, it is little, but it's probably yay high, and the amount of electronics that are in that thing, it weighs like 60 pounds. It feels like it's 6 feet tall on my head. I'm not trying to hold it. And it's also not just myself holding it. I'm working with puppeteers in the distance behind the camera, and they're doing cues with me, so it's not just a scene by myself in this like prop, so to speak. It's a real moving thing that's looking at me, and so even though like they would say cut, the puppeteers who I know very well from other shows, they were like joking around, like having it bite me and like do different, like turn its head and like pull on my jacket, and like it was a lot of, like it was very serious, but everyone, again, being family, knows to have like kind of fun between takes while they're resetting things or changing an angle or a lens or whatever. So yeah, that was a lot of fun too, dealing with the baby in that sense, knowing that it's not, I'm not actually killing it. So it was still tough though to put a knife up to it. Just anything in general, putting a knife up to it. And like really, granted, I guess you couldn't see my face because it was behind a mask, but it was probably like, I'm sorry. I wasn't playing with part behind the mask.
I think that was.
And my dog, Shanka, got a 50-pound bag of dogs. And yeah, we were the only ones that got paid.
Had you ever been interested in being in a movie before, or was it just...
No, I was 6 years old. My dad was in community theater. And in fact, he actually won Best Actor of the Year award in 1966, the same year Manos was made. My dad always played, not always, but mostly played the lead in the productions of the Festival Theater. And so in this case, he was King Henry in Henry IV. And John Reynolds, who played Torgo, was in it. And William Bryan Jennings, who played the sheriff, was in it. And I believe Hal Warren was in it also. So most of the male actors were in this play. And Dad won Best Actor of the Year award the same year that Manos was made.
kind of a contrast in that?
Kinda.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of levels to film.
Probably the character that he was playing, the character that sold it the best.
Yeah?
Like,
Yeah.
I guess that's not.
No, that's good. No, really. I mean, interaction. Come on. I mean, nobody else is asking. But yeah, so my dad was classically trained stage actor, for one thing, and you can tell by the drama.
Yeah.
Oh,
He was
yeah.
lifting his arms a lot in that movie, showing off your mother's
Yeah.
work on that costume.
My mom made the costume. She made my dress too, which was disappointing because it was just a dress out of my closet. She made all my clothes back then, except for when I was one of the wives at the end. You know what? I'm telling you, I was so excited to have a dress like the big girls. I really was. That was great. But the most creepy scene probably in the whole movie, when the 6-year-old becomes alive at the end.
Spoilers. No.
Why? I think you can see that.
We just watched it.
Oh, so it's like really fresh in your mind.
It's like, okay, like, watch this before we go, but my kids are crazy, and he said, well, they're showing me.
That is so cool. Okay.
So, here's a question, maybe, what was the movie, like, were a lot of those shots padded a lot longer just because the runtime had to be made up? Because it seemed like there was a lot of establishing shots and a lot of parts that just keep going on.
Right, and you know what? If you watch it again, you watch it real close, there's parts where the director of photography and his assistant, who was the kissing teenager in the park, Bernie Rosenblum, they were just so frustrated with Hal Warren, who created the film, and they had their own senses of humor. They were like the behind-the-scenes guy at the theater, so all these people knew each other, but they did little things to see if Hal Warren was paying attention. So there's a scene with my dad holding, and you'll see the beer bottle, in the background, for instance. So they did things like that just to see if anybody was paying attention, and they stayed in the film. But the 8-minute driving scene in the beginning, everybody in house not around to ask anymore, but as everyone understands it, that was where he intended the credits to go. You know, the beginning, the opening credits, and, you know. So 8-minute driving scene.
Speaking of padding, in the Mystery Science Theater commentary, they think that the knees were padded for.
Yeah, so my mother made most of the costumes. My parents were the creative side of it. My dad painted the painting, the hand sculptures in the background are all his work that he didn't make for the film. Well, the painting, yes, but the sculptures were just pieces of his other artwork. And the Torgo costume was actually, the coveralls were my dad's desert scavenging. Oh, and welding, that was his welding coveralls. So they were well worn, and John Reynolds was like 5'7", 5'8", and my dad was 6'2". So John's wearing, oh, the hat too, that was my dad's desert scavenging hat. The knees though, Dad made out of fencing wire, rolled fencing wire to make them more, and bent, and to make them more comfortable for John. It had, you know, like foam, you know, like upholstery type foam. So John wasn't uncomfortable, it was awkward, but it wasn't like horrible for him. Which some of the stories say that John Reynolds, you know, was doing drugs and then committed suicide because he was so uncomfortable in the costume. Well, let me tell you, the whole thing was filmed like in a week and a half. So you don't get it.
In a week and a half, yeah.
So I'm just.
You're like, just to discredit that rumor.
Yes.
Something that's really interesting about the way they made the movie is they chose to dub everything over in post-production.
It's not a choice necessarily, as the entire film was created in like $19,000 in a very short period of time. So the camera was rented, as I understand, and it was, I can't remember which one it was, but a Filmo, if you look that up. A handheld camera that they were using at that time in the Vietnam War for war footage. The Filmo shoots silent, so they had to put in all the voices. And the way they did that was Hal, my dad, William Bryan Jennings, who played the sheriff, and I think Bernie Rosenblum, who was the kissing teenager. We had like 4 men that got in a car and drove from El Paso to Houston, which is like 800 miles. And they went to a sound studio, and Hal's sister-in-law lived in Dallas. So she was the woman, they didn't take a woman with them. So there's 8 women in the film plus me, a 6-year-old child. All the women's voices were dubbed by Hal's sister-in-law. And she was she was an amateur opera singer.